that's never been the case. Well, thank you so much. I'm very pleased with that. I'm very happy with the reception I got. So thank you all very much for making me feel so welcome. As Andrew said, I've been a stop motion animator now for 45 years. In fact, more than that. And it's really the only job I've ever had. And as jobs go, it's a pretty weird one, but it's been a fantastic one. Because if you can make a living out of doing what's basically your hobby, I think you can say you've won. So I'm going to give you a rather truncated version of my experiences. And at the risk of sounding a little pretentious, this is also a bit of a story about dreams. It's about the power of imagination and the risk of following your heart, because when we first started, no one actually thought we were going to make a go of it, as I'll explain later. So I do stop motion animation. Now, for those of you who don't know what it is, stop motion animation is a form of animation which is closer to live action than it is to any other form of animation itself. So what happens is we have a puppet. I have one here. And it's about 1/6 scale. And this is a character I made for my short film, Sleight of Hand. So this is a character that's made of silicon, modelling clay, and all sorts of various bits and pieces. And the way the process works is we move the character and take a frame. We move it again, take a frame. We move it again, take a frame. And I do that 25 times, and you have 1 second of film to look at. So I have to move this thing 25 times for you to get 1 second. Having said that, of course, not only am I moving the character, I'm also trying to give it life. I'm trying to make it look like it actually has a thought process. So that means not just moving the left arm or right arm, I have to move the face, I have to move the eyebrows, I have to move the mouth, I have to move the eyes themselves, left leg, right leg, etc., etc. So what we're trying to do is create the illusion of life with this. Inside them, they have a skeleton. And that's called an armature. And the skeleton is a ball and socket joint skeleton, which holds the character up. But more importantly, what it does is it means that when I move the figure, it will hold in position while I take the frame. So there's quite a lot of engineering goes into one of these things, because you'd be surprised at how much pressure they're put under when you're on set. So that's that there. This is an armature for a seated character, and because the character's sitting down, I didn't need anything elaborate in the legs, so that's just aluminium wire. But you might recognise this guy. So Rusty and Sandy, the home hardware dogs, were something that we animated. Now, having said that, I'll just show off here. I was the one who came up with Dogalog rather than catalogue. But as you can see, it's the same idea. You just move it a fraction, take a frame, 1 second to look at. So, do any of you remember the Kraft Mr. Oily commercial from many, many years ago? Well, I animated that. That's me animating After All. Getting a bit older now. This is from Meanwhile at the Manufactory, and this is from my film Better Angels. The most well-known animation models at the moment probably are not ones that we did, but Wallace and Gromit. That's from Aardman Animations in the UK. I trained up a young animator here in Adelaide who went on to work for Aardman, and he invited us across to go and have a look at him shooting. And this is my business partner, Richard Chataway, and there we are with Wallace and Gromit. So yes, and it was interesting to see all the other animators at the time, because I realised then that yes indeed, we are all mad. Here's a trailer from my latest film. And not only did I have to move the character a frame at a time, but the camera also needs to be moved a frame at a time. So that film's about 12 minutes long, and obviously I didn't have time to show it to you all today, but that's done rather well too. That's picked up about 40 awards around the world. So I was born in Manchester, a place called Eccles, and it is where the Eccles cakes come from, in 1958. I was always fascinated, like most kids, by monsters. Couldn't get enough of them. I collected fossils, and I could name and even spell the names of most dinosaurs by the time I was age 6. In those days, they used to have Saturday afternoon matinees at the cinema. You have them here as well? I don't know if they did, but anyway. That's where I was introduced to film, and that is the Broadway in Eccles. I was looking on the internet and I found a picture in all its shabby grandeur. All I can remember is the carpet was really sticky from Kia Ora orange juice. I mean, it was quite feral, and the kids were always terribly behaved. My older sister used to take me because it was her job to keep me occupied. She's 6 years older than me. And one Saturday we saw Jason and the Argonauts. Now, it was directed by a man called Don Chaffee, but the real stars of the film were the stop-motion creations of the brilliant animator Ray Harryhausen. And that's Ray there. He was a true genius of stop-motion, and filmmakers such as Peter Jackson, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, Guillermo del Toro, and many others have all said it was Ray and his films that got them started as youngsters and wanting to make films. So without Ray, we wouldn't have had Lord of the Rings, we wouldn't have had Avatar, we wouldn't have had Raiders of the Lost Ark, we wouldn't have had Jurassic Park. You know that game where you can pick 6 people from history, alive, dead, even fictional, and have a dinner party with them? Well, often it's the same old suspects, you know, Jesus, Isaac Newton, Einstein, Kim Kardashian. I said fictional characters. Well, my first choice would have been Ray Harryhausen. He was an inspiration to me, and still is, even though he's passed away. I would have given anything to meet him, but of course, sadly, that would never happen. He was quite old by then and lived on the other side of the world. He was an American, but he lived in London. There was no way that I would ever get the chance to meet him and tell him how much it influenced my career, and that's a regret. But in Ray's films that I saw in Eccles on that Saturday afternoon, Jason and the Argonauts, we were treated to all sorts of amazing creatures. In particular, a group of skeletons that he had to fight in stop motion. Shot in the early 60s, about 1961, I would confidently say that this is the greatest couple of minutes of stop motion ever committed to film. And as a young lad, simply blew my mind. But Ray saved the best for last as far as I was concerned, and that was the Hydra. And this has always been my favourite monster. I found it terrifying, but I still remember that when the Hydra made his entrance, all the kids started to laugh. And I was terrified, and I asked my sister, who was also laughing, what they were laughing at. And she said, it's because you can see the strings. Now, of course, there were no strings, it's stop motion movie. So I've thought about this far too much over the decades, but I suspect that I've worked it out. And I think the film was already a few years old when it screened at the Saturday matinee, and I reckon the film was scratches, which ran vertically, and the kids just thought they were strings. So the next film I saw was 1 Million Years BC, with the heady mix for a straight 8-year-old boy of dinosaurs, like this Allosaurus, and Raquel Welch in a rabbit-skin bikini. And I've got to say, this has left a lasting impression on me. Even now, when I'm feeling a bit frisky, I still ask my wife if she'll put on the costume. But she told me she won't do it anymore, because she's sick of looking like an Allosaurus. When I told my wife I was coming to do this, she said, "You're not going to do the Allosaurus joke, are you?" Yeah. But during this time I was also introduced to several other monsters, the most obvious one being the original King Kong from 1933. Now here's a fun fact if you want to be left alone at parties. King Kong is not a gorilla. Everybody seems to think that King Kong is a gorilla. It's one of those things it's a bit like Frankenstein, where everybody assumes that Frankenstein is the monster, but in fact the monster is actually called the creature, and Frankenstein was the doctor. In the same way, King Kong was never meant to be a gorilla. What he was the sole example left of a group of ape-like creatures that lived on Skull Island. And the reason I bring this up is because in the 1930s, the sculptors were just as good as they are now. And they could have made a gorilla if they wanted one, but they didn't. They made him a bit more human in the face because they wanted people to respond to him with a bit more appeal, I suppose. So that's why he's not a gorilla. Please pass this on to all your friends. Anyway, it turns out I was reasonably good at sculpting, and this stood me in good stead for my future aspirations. We came out to Australia on the Fair Start, now dubbed the Fun Ship. In 1969, I was a £10 pom. And to cut a long story short, I went to school, I joined a semi-professional drama group, I took up acting, directing and writing for the theatre, and then I went to Teachers College to train to be a teacher. And I was part of this bunch of reprobates, and that's me, second from the left, with the sunglasses, looking cool. I remember when I was at college, my mother asked me what my ideal job would be, and I said that I'd like to be a sculptor and get paid for it. And we both laughed, because of course that was never going to happen. You see, a career in the arts was never an option, that was for other people. And jumping ahead, when I was running my own animation company, every time I saw my father, he would sincerely ask how I was and was I okay. I noticed that he always did this, but it was only after he passed away that his then wife told me that he never stopped worrying about me because in his mind, I couldn't possibly be making a living out of this. And I can see his point. In his mind, you got a job working for a company or working for someone else. He couldn't fathom the idea of creating your own work and surviving. But anyway, while I was at college, I discovered filmmaking and the die was cast. I never went teaching. Turns out I don't like kids. And as part of the course, I had to make a few films, and that's where I met my business partner, Richard Chataway. And we're still making films together now. So for our Bachelor of Education degree, we decided to make an animated film, and I saw it as a chance to make the sculptures that I made come to life. That's me there, sculpting. The only problem was that we didn't know what we were doing. It was pre-internet, and not that many people were doing stop motion, so we basically had to work everything out for ourselves. And the result was a film we made called The Disc of Megala. There are a couple of characters from that there. It was a sword and sorcery epic in clay animation, heavily influenced, of course, by Jason and the Argonauts. So, cut to the future, and the big wigs at the South Australian Film Corporation saw it, and they offered us a 2-year contract to work for them and set up an animation department. And we made our next film, Waltzing Matilda, for the Film Corporation, and we're lucky enough to win the AACTA award for it. I don't want to sound like all this fell into our laps, because it was very hard work, and we were constantly knocked back in our efforts to make films. But we had what our film lecturer referred to as stickability. And it was a mindset that fortunately both Richard and I had. And that was, if we started something, then we finished it. And we didn't let anything get in the way. Anything at all, like starting an animation film and not knowing how to animate. So after 2 years, we left the Film Corporation and set up our own company, Anifex, and you saw the logo at the beginning of this presentation. And I have to say that not one person gave us a chance of making a go of it in South Australia. We were constantly told that the only way we could eke out a meagre living as animators was to move interstate, Sydney or Melbourne. And even then, the chances of it working for us was less than 1%. We were told over the years by various people, many of them professionals in the industry, that we weren't good enough, that we were in the wrong place to try this, and that Adelaide wasn't big enough, it was too small a market. It was a pipe dream, that we were too niche. Stop motion was such an odd thing that you couldn't possibly make a living out of it, not enough people knew about it, that we weren't experienced enough. I was once told that this is true, I was once told that my fingers were too stubby to be a sculptor. And of course, the main one was, it simply wouldn't work. So the main problem here, of course, is that you begin to doubt yourself, and that can be the biggest hurdle of all to overcome. So we ignored all that, and we set up Anifex, and needless to say, it did work. So that's in our studio. It's based in Kent Town. I talked at the beginning about the camera move, and we had to shoot that a frame at a time as well. That thing in the background is called a motion control rig, and it was the second one in Australia, and it was the first one of its type in Australia, and it was down in Kent Town. Cost about cost about a house in Burnside when we bought it, but it's a brilliant thing, and it moves the camera a frame at a time, so we can actually plan a move and then get this thing to move a frame at a time. While short film was our love, we quickly realised that there was no money in it, so we started to make TV commercials. But even when we were making the commercials, we still had our eye on our first love, which was short film. The commercials gave us what we called our bread and butter money, and the short films gave us what we called our soul food. The commercials brought in enough money that we were able to buy a large warehouse in Kent Town, which we converted into a studio space, and it went on to become the largest stop motion studio in the Southern Hemisphere, in Adelaide. And in there we shot some of our best known commercials. So, Dorothy. Roger the dog. I'll leave these here at the end. I know we're all pushed for time, but if you want to have a look, please look. You can pick up the armatures and look at those. Please don't pick up these models. You have to be a trained professional. Or like me, an untrained professional. So that's me animating schmackos. The home hardware dogs, of course, you've already seen Rusty here. That's me animating them. We did Louis the Fly. We were the first people to make Louis the Fly into a three-dimensional model. Up until then, he'd only been a drawing. Mr. Reach with the flip-top head. Paddle Pop Lion. And literally thousands of others. There was a point in Australian television when you looked at TV commercials, 95% of them were done by us. And we got well, other animators got really upset with us because they saw us taking the market. But we had a motion control rig. Yeah. We also went on to work for a number of feature films and TV series doing special effects. In particular, the Japanese science fiction Ultraman. I've got to tell you, if you've never blown up a car, it's well worth doing. That was fabulous fun. That's even better. That is actually 1/8 of the exposure we set up. We stopped doing it after a while because we thought we'd like to keep our fingers. Anyway, I've also been asked over the years to give a few talks around the world. And it's a real shock when you realise that people are not only listening to you, but actually writing down what you're saying, which is what happens when I was at a film festival in Stuttgart, and I was just riffing, and I looked around, all of a sudden I realised everybody was... I thought, hell's bells, I better make this work. So now we've come full circle. I'm using my Bachelor of Education degree to teach students at the Adelaide University, passing on the knowledge, but not only of stop motion, but of ignoring the naysayers, ignoring the people who want you to play it safe and to stop you from dreaming. So one Friday afternoon I was at the studio and I received a phone call from the Brisbane International Animation Festival, where one of my short films was screening. And the guy on the other end of the line, after a few pleasantries, asked me what I was doing the following Monday after the weekend. Ever cautious before committing to anything, I asked why, and he said, we brought Ray Harryhausen over from the UK for the festival, and he would love to have dinner with us, and was I interested? Well, I couldn't say yes fast enough. After my earlier comments about Ray, you might be able to get an inkling of how thrilled I was at the prospect of having dinner with my absolute childhood hero. I had a weird weekend of anticipation, but on Monday morning I woke up and horribly I had this terrible pain in my neck and my face and my sinuses, and I thought, I've got something horrible here. I've picked up a bug and I'll have to cancel, because Ray was 82 at the time, and I thought, I'm not going to kill him, no matter how much I want to see him. So I said to my wife, who was a very practical nurse, and I said, I can't do it because I've got something and I can't give it to him. And she just smiled at me, climbed out of her Allosaurus costume and said, I've been watching you non-stop smiling like a Cheshire cat all weekend. Your face is hurting because you've been smiling too much. True story, apart from the Allosaurus bit. But then I was worried about the meal. I often say never meet your heroes because if they're horrible, it could be devastating. So that night I made my way to Stanley's Fish Cafe on Goodger Street. Remember that? Yeah. And it's the rudest I've ever been. Ray was sitting there next to his wife, Diana, and somebody from the Brisbane International Animation Festival either side. And I just went up to the guy next to Ray and I just said, move. And he said, what? And I said, you've had him all week. I've got him tonight. Move. So he did. But I needn't have worried. He was a beautiful man. He was so generous with his time and talent. And that's me having dinner with Ray Harryhausen. I don't know if you can see the sparkle in my eyes from there. I still get a thrill out of seeing this photo. And the next day he even came to Anifex and visited the studio. So I started off this talk by saying that it was essentially about dreams. The dream of being a sculptor and making a living from it. The dream of establishing an animation studio here in Adelaide that would go on to make work seen around the world. The dream of making films and moving audiences that see them. I never tire of seeing an audience laugh or even sometimes cry because I've been able to manipulate a puppet made of clay, wire and silicon and make them cry or laugh. If you can manipulate that to strike a chord with people, I think you're doing well. And then I got to meet my hero, Ray Harryhausen, and these were the dreams that actually came true for me. So thank you for allowing me to tell you this story and for giving me your time. Thank you very much.
That was amazing. We've got time for 2 questions, if anybody has one. Flavia?
Thank you for that. My question is the future. How do you see the future?
The future for stop motion animation in particular is really good, I think, because when computer graphics came out, CGI, I think everybody assumed it was going to take over. But for filmmakers, CGI is just another tool. It's something else we can use in our kit to make images. And I think there is a real nostalgia and a warmth and a love for stop motion films, which no other animation form has. So consequently, you've got people like Tim Burton, who also was introduced, loved Ray Harryhausen. You've got Tim Burton, you've got people like Nick Park, you've got the people at Leica in Portland, who are just doing the most fabulous stop motion work. And I can't see it dying because I think there is something tangible about having a puppet, and it's not a group of pixels on a screen. And you know, the very fact that I lifted Dorothy up here and everybody went, oh, you know, and frankly, filmmakers get that too. We love the visceralness of it. One of the things I do in my course at university is I say to them, we've got to, sorry, Andrew, we've got to get ourselves dirty doing this. You know, we're going to make things, we're going to paint things, we're going to glue things, it's a bit like kindergarten. And most of them have done all their artwork on a tablet. All of a sudden, they've got to use these. And it's fantastic seeing the way that they just open up and light up. So I don't think that stop motion's in any danger at the moment.
No.
Thanks for the wonderful presentation. Would it have been better if you were in Los Angeles?
No, absolutely not. Apart from anything else, I love Adelaide. And we live in Adelaide. Like I said, everybody wanted to move to Sydney and Melbourne. No, we'll do it here. We called it building a better mousetrap. And that was, we will make it so good here that you'd be crazy to go anywhere else. And that's what we did. And in terms of working in Los Angeles, no. It's a soulless place if you've ever been. And Adelaide's got everything we wanted. And, you know, I don't think moving to Los Angeles we would have done any better than we have here. And we were able to bring an enormous amount of work from overseas and interstate into South Australia. And that meant millions of dollars for us. Thank you very much.